Good evening, a gute Woche, a gesunde Woche, a mazel dicke Woche. And we have now entered into Rosh Chodesh Elul. Today was Shabbos Mevorachim, and tonight and tomorrow evening begins Chodesh Elul, which we know the Shulchan Aruch says that Hayitokar Shofar Bo'ir V'am Lo Yechradu, that it gives a chill to each and every person when we enter into the holy days of Elul, and that each and every day is a hachana. We say L'David Hashem Ori V'Yishi. We begin the second day of Rosh Chodesh, which is the first day of Elul. And we have Tekiah Shofar, which is not Moitzi. Anyone known as Yoitze Tekiah Shofar with it, because it's only the Shofar of Rosh Hashanah that is the mitzvah aseh, the eraisa of listening and being Yoitze with the Kol Shofar, and that is the most distinct single item which serves as a grenade against all of the koiches hara that through the year we establish and have from things that we tripped and we did not do correctly, what we ate, what we said, what we did, and it comes out to meet us, to greet us, and to stand against us. Oh, you're coming to ask for a new year, health and wealth and children and nachas and look at this army of what's meeting us, produced from your maisim, from your actual deeds. But the shofar has the power of disseminating, of absolutely destructing and demolishing all of those bad with the power of Tekiyas Shofar. Now, that's Rosh Hashanah. We conclude Yom Kippur, which is 40 days from tomorrow, and we have the Slicha and the Mechila and the Kapara, and we do not have the Shofar for a mitzvah of Tekiyah Shofar, but that's what concludes the 40-day process, and then Rosh Hashanah and the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then the day of Yom Kippur itself, that there is a siyum, like a person takes an envelope, and when it is sealed, and then he puts his thumb up and down to make sure it's completely closed and successfully sent, so too is the Tekiyah Shofar at the end of Yom Kippur, that is the send-off and the sealing of all of our tefillos and all of our hanhaga throughout the 40-day period. Now, we know that usually the first Sedra that is in the month of Elul is Shoftim. And the opening words of the Pasuk, Shoftim v'shoitrim, judges and police. That means rule of law. Titen lecha bechol she'orecha. You should put by all of your gates, meaning simply that every city needs to have a judicial system and has to have a protective unit of law enforcement, and that's Shoftim v'Shoitrim. But the Meforshim ask, why doesn't it say Shoftim v'shoitrim titen lecha b'chol irecha? You should put judges and police at the entrance of your cities, your hamlets, your villages, your communities. Why does it say she'orecha, gates? And they answer and say, because it's a remez, it is a unique reminder that we're talking about not just entry and exiting of a town, but we're talking, that's why it says titen locha. Locha is a singular, could say lochem, too many. But why does it say locha? Because the she'arecha is referring to the gates of your body. That means we have things that go in and go out. We have eyes, Baruch Hashem, ad mea ve'esrim shana, that you could see what's doing. You're looking as a person at what is in front of you and what is next to you that's going out. But you also take in what you see. You're standing in front of a tzaddik and you're gazing at the holiness which exudes from the tzaddik's face. A mouth takes in the food that we hope is kosher, and we take in everything else that has to come through and enter our body through our mouth. But how do we speak? What goes out of the mouth? So it's like a gate, the ears, the mouth, the eyes, the nose. And that's the message. You're now coming into Elul, and you want to make a difference in your entire year. And you want to be able to sway the pendulum from one side to the other, and it should be a Shnas Chayim, it should be a Shana Tova Umesuka, that all of these things that we strive for, that Titen Lecha B'chol She'orecha, that it should be able to enter in all the good and go out with all of equally good statements, sights, and expressions that we make throughout the year. Now, we know that there is a mitzvah in this Sedra of Minui Melech. That means Klal Yisrael and Tul Shol HaMelech, there was no such thing as a king by the Jews. But the Torah says that when you want to be like any other nation and have incorporated into your society the idea of majesty, royalty, and have kingship, so you should know that the Torah tells two things to the Melech, and it gives the reason. Now, we do not find by most mitzvahs that the Torah says do this or don't do that and gives you a reason. But here by the king, indeed it does. It says, V'lo yarbe lo nashim, because they will cause a sway in his avodah HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his closeness in effectively effectuating the mitzvahs and the things that he does. Too many women. And the second thing it says, V'lo yarbe lo susim. He shouldn't have a lot of horses, because the prime and the most cultured horse, they were all came from Mitzrayim. And it says, V'lo yoshev Mitzrayim, you're not supposed to go back to Mitzrayim. And if a king has a stable with so many beautiful horses, and then he'll want to go see what's doing in Mitzrayim to acquire a whole brand and a whole group of new horses, it's going to bring him back to Mitzrayim. So those are the two things that the Torah says he should not have a lot of, and gives the reason. Now, Shlomo HaMelech, as we all know, was the super wise king. There was no one like him. And he reasoned, he saw the reason, and he said, it's not going to sway me. It's not going to affect me. And he had, some say 1,000 wives, but whatever it was, and we know that during his lifetime, Shlomo HaMelech, the moon was as big as it was originally before it was, because he brought such kedusha into the world. And it says that the women that he kept taking up more wives and more, that he was mala all of the neshamas and everything as he had intimacy with another wife, that there were armies of neshamas and nitzots and sparks of kedusha that were imprisoned and held captive by these women, as the Arizal elaborates. And as Shlomo HaMelech was unified with them, he was able to extract all of it and bring it back to its source. So it wasn't like he was a Baal Taiva. He was Nifter, he was 52, and he was king like his father 40 years. But that's why he did that. And in the horses, he also used his seichel. I'm not going to be affected by going into Mitzrayim and wanting to go back to Mitzrayim. This all doesn't apply to me. And he tripped with both. That he was swayed by the women and he was affected by the extra horses. But the Chidushei Harim comes and asks that if you're asking such a question about the two things that the Torah elaborated and said he shouldn't do, and he did, and he tripped, why don't you say what it says at the beginning of our Sedra, that it says that lo sikach shochad, that a judge should not take any type of bribes, and it says there the reason, because the Gemara says the only two places that it says the reason is by the horses and by the women. But at the beginning of our Seder, it says, Lo sikach shochad, don't take any bribes. Ki ha-shochad ya'aver einei chachamim v'salif divrei tzadikim. It gives the reason that shochad, if you take a bribe, it's going to color your vision of judgment to be able to clearly see both sides. So why wasn't that listed in the Gemara as a third thing that the Torah says don't do, and it gives you the reason? So the answer, says the Chidushei Harim, is because it only listed the things in the Parsha of Melech, and Shlomo HaMelech never thought that he could make a judgment and not be affected by shochad, because the Torah gives you the reason that even einei chachamim v'salif divrei tzadikim, that applies to him. The other two, he thought, no, I can supersede the reasoning and the positioning and everything that it says. But he never thought that he could successfully exclude himself from the reasoning of Ki ha-shochad ya'aver einei chachamim v'salef divrei tzaddikim. Now, like towards the beginning of our Sedra, it says that kechol asher yorucha. And there's a lot of discussion in the Meforshim and in the Gemara. You see, it's talking about the leaders, the poiskim, the rabbonim, the shoftim, the neviim of a generation, and people tend to always compare. I remember that when we went 60 years ago to, let's say, a Aguda convention or to a dinner even of Agudas Yisrael, and I was Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky's Gabbai, and when we went up that first year and I sat the Rosh Yeshiva down, you had sitting there Rav Aaron Kotler, and you had Rav Moshe Feinstein, and you had the Kapushnitzer Rebbe, and you had the Biana Rebbe, you had the biggest of the big. And then when we came back 20 years later, or 25 years later, a lot of people would say, look at the dais, Talmidei Chachamim, Rosh Yeshiva, but no Rav Aaron, and no Rav Moshe, no Rav Yaakov, and no... So we tend to minimize when we have seen the greatest of the great, and they're no longer here. So the pasuk comes to tell you, and look at Rashi and the Meforshim, Kechol asher yerucha, when they paskin, that means the newer generation, you have to look at it as if Moshe Rabbeinu is coming himself to paskin for Klal Yisrael. That means you have to have the reverence and respect for the current generation, whoever became the leaders in your generation. And that's how you have to respond to their opinions. Now, we know in Shulchan Aruch that there's three liquids that the Shulchan Aruch says that if it's left overnight and it's not covered or closed with some sort of cork or top, but it's open, it's sitting there in the cup or the bottle and it was left open. So the Shulchan Aruch says by wine, by water, and by milk, those three, you're not allowed to drink it in the morning, because we are chosheh that maybe a snake came and was drinking from it and then put its poison into the liquid. That's the halacha in Shulchan Aruch. But the Shulchan Aruch says that Bisman Hazeh by the Ramah was 400 years ago, 375 years ago, that Bisman Hazeh we don't have to be choishesh, and we do not have to throw out the milk or the water or the wine, because we don't have those type of snakes around that are in our in our houses or wherever we live, so you don't have to be worried about it. But the Vilna Gaon, who lived from 1727 till 1797, which is exactly 70 years, he said that even though the Shulchan Aruch says that we don't have to be noyeg today or worried about these type of snakes, that he was very careful, and all of his Talmidim, that if there was any liquid left open overnight, they didn't drink it, they continued. And he said a very important reason. He said, when we hear a psak from a Baal Ruach HaKodesh, it did not involve only the actual issue. There are deeper secrets involved in their psak. So even if there were no snakes around and it was correct, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch said you don't have to be worried about it, but I say, and I teach my Talmidim and hold, that you still have to, because it was a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, and it was established with its roots in Kabbalah and in the secrets of the Torah, which even if on the surface it's not applicable on the surface, but it's still applicable because it was always paskined attached to a unit of deeper secrets when it was stated as a halacha. In other words, if a professor, Lahavdil Elef Avdolas, wrote 10 books in geometry, that doesn't mean there were secrets in it or anything. That means yesh chochma bagoyim. It could be very valid in its realm for geometry, but it doesn't mean that it has corresponding attachments of secrets and all sorts of things to it. It says what he wrote, and that's it. But by halacha, that's kodesh kadoshim, and everything we have is with pardes, with pshat, remez, drush, and sod. So therefore the Vilna Gaon said that that is what he would do. Now, they once came, there was a city not far from Radin, that the Rav passed away in that city, and there was a fight, there was a dispute, who should become the new Rav. And the family of the Rav that was Nifters felt that their family, the son, because that's the halacha, that if you have a Rav or you have a Chazan or you have a Rosh Yeshiva, his son is supposed to inherit. And even if he's not as big, that means as long as he's a Yerosh Shamayim and he's a basic from Yid, and he is a Talmud Chacham, so he could be a Rav. I mean, if he's a Rav, he has to know how to paskin and what to say. But it doesn't have to mean he has to equal his father, who may have been a greater giant than him. So, but the Tzibur wanted someone else. So they decided to go to the Chofetz Chaim. They went to Radin and they placed their question before him. And they gave the background of the son, and they gave the background of the one that they wanted to become. And the Chofetz Chaim paskined that yes, the halacha is that the son should become. But I paskin that the other man should become, because today we have all of the isms, communism, socialism, Marxism, the humanism, and all sorts of isms, and you need a fighter to be a Rav. And whereas the son is a wonderful Yid, and the halacha is with him, but that halacha stands with understanding the role of what the psak is. And it was to get someone who would most effectively be able to lead and to be the backbone of steering the entire tzibur of that kehila or town in the right direction. And the other person who is not family to the Rav who is Nifter, he has the dynamics of being able to exude the mantle of leadership in the proper way and to fill the needs of that city. And he became the Rav. Now, similarly, there is a parsha in this Sedra, Shoftim, about the Kohen Mashuach Milchama. And I last year spoke a little bit about, and I want to just touch on it because this idea of taking over, for instance, the Kohen Gadol, if he was Nifter and his son was Roy, he became the next Kohen Gadol. And it went for whatever leadership role, but there was one exception. The Kohen Mashuach Milchama, which means when they proclaimed war and the trumpets were sounded that they were going to wage war, before they waged the war, the Kohen Mashuach Milchama got up and gave a speech. He was like the military chaplain. And it was very possible that his entire life he never ever functioned. Because if they didn't go to war, he didn't make the speech. And he got up for one reason, to be able to strengthen the resolve of the Klal Yisrael when they were going to wage war, and to be able to fortify their mahus, their attitude, their frame of mind, and to psychologically prepare them to be able to wage the war with full stewardship of battling a war. Now, if this Kohen Mashuach Milchama was dynamic and he was forceful, he accomplished and achieved his goal of what he was appointed for. But what happens if he had a very wonderful son, but he was timid, he was edel, and he was a Mekayim Mitzvahs, even a Tzaddik Gomer. But that wasn't the job of the Kohen Mashuach Milchama. He had to come to liven up the resolve and the attitude of each and every Yid before waging war. So that, says the Rambam, was the exception. The Kohen Gadol and everyone else, their sons inherited, but not the Kohen Mashuach Milchama. Now, one of the things at the end of our Sedra, he said, he said a few things, was that a person who planted a vineyard and he didn't reap the benefit of that vineyard yet, he should turn around and go home. Another thing he said, that somebody who just got married, and the first year of marriage, the husband is supposed to look for ways of making happy his new wife. It means maybe he has to bring home flowers, like our florists, Baruch Hashem, you see these are real flowers, these are not, sometimes our guests come over, they're so beautiful, they touch the flower just to see if it's a real flower or is it a fake flower. You know, maybe you have to bring home the flowers every year of Shabbos, and think of things in ways to uplift the atmosphere into the realm of simcha and happiness and gladness of heart. So a man who got married and he didn't finish the first year of marriage, he was told, go back home and make your wife happy. And a third thing, that if someone built a house and he didn't live in it yet, and he's just about to finish it, and he didn't enjoy it, so he should go back home too. And the Torah says more by all of them, because in your mind, maybe if you're going to get killed in war, you're ready to go out to war, that another person's going to come and live in the house, inaugurate it, dedicate it, enjoy it. What you took 5 years to build the house and to pick out all of the furniture and all of the items to enhance the totality of the house, that you're going to think about somebody else doing it. You're going to become so depressed that you're going to pull down the atmosphere for everybody you're with in that army and waging war. And the Mefarshim say that it shows you how ugly our midos could be, because the Torah is saying, and the Torah understands the psyche of each and every individual. It doesn't say, well, you're going to regret going, you're worried about all that money you put into building this house, and you're going to give it over to somebody else. It doesn't say anything about the money. It just says the grinding of the mind that somebody else may reap the benefit of the new wife or the vineyard or the house. So first of all, that teaches us a separate lesson, that we should be happy with someone else's successes. That means we can't sit there and say, look, I undertook 2 major business deals this year and I was flat on my face in both. And my friend, who I don't think has the abilities that I have, and he succeeded. He had a beautiful, unbelievable year. So I am happy for him, but I'm a little bit jealous, because I work just as hard and I'm just as smart, and I think I'm just as deserving as my neighbor. Now, there is a very interesting thing attached to this, because not only these 3 things, but the Torah says that somebody, the Kohen Meshuach Milchama, announces, anyone here who is really afraid of war, turn around and go home. And for a moment, every person had to stop and think. I mean, look, there's a certain fear of going to war. The person could die, could be killed, there can be trouble. But there was a level of honesty, and if the guy was shaking and he's going to make everybody near him shake in war, he's going to again pull down the morale. So Mefarshim say, and again the Sfas Emes's grandfather, the Chidushei Harim, he says there's a Mishnah that says, Beis Shammai says that if somebody has afilu hiducho b'tavshilo, that a husband that's Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says you can divorce only for ervas dover. You found some immoral, improper behavior of the wife, you can divorce her. Comes Bais Hillel and says, even if the cholent didn't taste the way you want it to taste, you can divorce your wife. Now, usually Bais Hillel is the makel and the softer one. Liasad Lavo, when Mashiach will come, will paskin like Beis Shammai. But until Mashiach, we always, except for 6 exceptions, in all the other tens and tens of halachas, that there's a difference of opinion between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel is always the makel and the easier one. So now he comes and says that if you don't like the food that your wife made, even that is enough of a reason to divorce her. So he explains from our Sedra, that Mishnah of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, because Mefarshim say the truth is that someone who built a house, who just got married or made a vineyard, he should go to, so what? If he built a vineyard, people are going out to war, to wage war, he should be part of it. But we include that exception to waging war because of the reason that he is afraid. Because the Torah said a 4th reason, he can go back home if he's really trembling. Now, if that was the only reason for a man to go back home, then everyone would look at it like, oh, there's the chicken. Everyone else had to put their life on the line. And this guy, he was afraid, and he said, yeah, I'm shaking, I'm so afraid, so I'm going on. Oh, the chicken is here. So to cover for his dignity, because he was being honest and he was really he was so afraid, we didn't want to embarrass him, that the people should make fun of him. So we gave other reasons that when somebody saw someone coming home from war, that he could be put under the umbrella of that to cover his reason, because they don't know. Is he going back because he made a vineyard? Is he going back because he just built a house? Did he just get, we don't know this guy. But probably it's one of those reasons. It does not highlight the reason of being afraid. So says the Chidushei Arim, that the Beis Hillel was not being more difficult, that even for food that you don't like the way she cooked it. Because if you didn't have that reason, then if somebody got divorced and it was like Beis Shammai, so they would know that the woman committed adultery or there was a basis of immorality. Who would ever want to marry her after she's divorced? So Beis Hillel came and gave reasons that if somebody got divorced, they couldn't say immorality was involved, because even if he didn't like her cooking, he could divorce her. And that became the reason of why he was divorcing the wife. So it's to cover up the indignity and the embarrassment of what could be the real reason. So Beis Hillel gave a platform of reasoning to be able to save the woman, and that she should have a fighting chance, a second chance in life, to be able to get married once again. And that's why we have the extra reasons of why he can go home. Now, there's a pasuk in this week's Sedra that says, Ki yarchiv Hashem Elokecha es gevulcha. That means we were given Eretz Yisrael and it was divided up, and there were 2.5 Shoftim that stayed on the other side of the Yarden. And the pasuk says in our Sedra that when Mashiach comes, we have the Gula Shlema, and that part becomes Eretz Yisrael also. that you should, when you have Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoini, those 10 nations, those 3, which make it 10, become part of Eretz Yisrael. You should add on 3 Orei Miklot. That means there were 6 Orei Miklot plus the 42 Orei Leviim, because the Leviim didn't have their own land, but they had little clusters which were just Leviim living there. And if someone needed an Orei Miklot who killed unintentionally B'shogeg, that he could run to one of the 6, or he could go into the Orei Miklot in the 42 towns of the Orei HaLeviim. But our pasuk tells us that when our Hashem will expand the totality of the scope of the geographics of Eretz Yisrael after the Geula, you should add on 3 Orei Miklot in that area. But the Meforshim jump and say, Orei Miklot, we thought that once Mashiach comes, there's no more killing. And so what do you mean that there's going to be 3 more Orei Miklot for a person to run to if there was killing and this guy needs an Orei Miklot? What, there's still murders taking place? So the Gemara answers, Meforshim, that you need 3 more Orei Miklot over there, because first of all, on that side of the Yarden, murder was much more prevalent. And even though murder means intentionally, and these cities were for the unintentional, but we were still living, even though it's a heavenly living, but it could be it's still before Yemos HaMashiach, because there's the Geula, but there's Mashiach, then there's Tchias HaMesim. There's levels of bringing the world into a heavenly abode and becoming that. So there had to be something, because they were so prone to murder in that area that there wouldn't be that type of mazid, but there could very well be the unintentional. So say some of the Meforshim. But we have to maintain and be sensitive to the pitfalls and the shortcomings of human dimension and nature. And that's why by Mincha on Yom Kippur, which Yom Kippur is the holiest day, like I told you that the Shalach HaKadosh asked his Talmidim, which is bigger, Shabbos or Yom Kippur? And they all said Shabbos, because they said we have 7 Aliyahs on Shabbos, and then Yom Kippur there's only 6. And on Shabbos, someone's Machal Shabbos, there's a death penalty. But if someone's Machal Yom Kippur, it's chorus. It's not a death penalty. So they said Shabbos was bigger. So the Shalach HaKadosh answered them and said, no. Shabbos is Keneged Shemitah, and Yom Kippur is Keneged Yovel, which is much bigger. And that it's so mechaper, it atones to such a level. That's why even the avodim, who are servants, are affected physically and they go free. Just like we as human beings go free, and we are part and parcel of the slich of the mechila and the kapara, but the day is the olam hakeser, just like Purim, and that's the highest of the high. So he explained to them why Yom Kippur is bigger. And why is the punishment less? Because it's such a day of chesed to forgive Klal Yisrael that even the oynish is knocked down a notch. So said the Shloah Kadosh to his Talmidim. But we know on Yom Kippur, as the day progresses, it becomes bigger and holier, higher and higher and higher. So I once said to you, how could it be that the Kriya on Mincha on Yom Kippur is all about the Aroyos? That's the last thing anyone would choose to make the Kriya of Yom Kippur Mincha. But the Meforshim say is to tell each and every Yid, you could soar heavenward, and you could be so holy and so special and think that you're infallible, that you're untouchable. You spent your whole life growing and becoming better and better, holier and holier. But you should know that in any second, you could trip and fall all the way down the ladder. So that's why by Yom Kippur on Mincha, which is already Chaya, because Yom Kippur, myriad is Keneged Nefesh, that's the lowest level. Then Shachris is Ruach, and then Musaf is Neshama, and then Mincha is Chaya, and then Yechida is Yechida, the Ne'ilah is Yechida, so it's higher, and Mincha is way up there. That in the middle of Mincha, when you think you're in the realm of holy, 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 you should know that a human being could trip and fall down the ladder at any time. So that is the reason that they had in those three cities, Aver Layardim, they put in to remind that, listen, it's getting better and better, but we're not there yet. And therefore you have to be careful. You could be susceptible to accidentally killing, which would require you to go to a Orei Miklat, and that's why the three, when they established it, even when they take over Israel, they had three Orei Miklat there, so say the Meforshim. Now there is a pasuk in this Sedra, Tomim Tihiyah im Hashem Elokecha, that you should be simple with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And indeed, the Ramban learns from this pasuk that if somebody wants to go to ask an astrologer what is going to be in the future, it's an Isser D'Oraisa. The Ramban learns it from this pasuk because it says, Tomim Tiyah, you're not supposed to supersede your human faculties. If you want to become like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to just live each and every day and daven that the best should come and the best should be, but not to look for that type of stuff. The Rambam learns it from Lo Se'onenu and Parshas Kedoshim that it's an Isser D'Oraisa to go to a astrologer or to Sister Anne, who used to have these stores with the candles behind the curtains, or the curtains right there in front of you, and you couldn't see what was doing inside. So the Kotzker used to say, there are two places that the word Tomim is stated. Here, Tomim Tiyah im Hashem Elokecha, and it also says Tomim by Para Aduma Tamima, that it should be perfect. Why these two places? So the Kotzker said, because we know that according to one opinion, if there are two hairs that are not perfectly red, like the rest of the cow, then it's disqualified. It cannot be a Parah Aduma. But said the Kotzker, what happens if on the animal there is one hair that is black or a different color, one hair? Then according to everyone, it's still a kosher Parah Aduma. 2 have to be there, or according to another opinion, 5 have to be there for it to be able to be invalid. So said the Kotzker that pasuk of Parah Aduma gives you the leeway of one hair, but by Tomim Tiyah, it doesn't say even one hair. You're allowed to be less than Tomim Tiyah im Hashem Elokecha, that you have to strive and be perfected, that not even one drop, like the Torah, like the Parah Aduma, that for one hair is okay. And you should feel for Tomim Tiyah that it should be actually exactly our striving and our seeking for perfection in the area of our innocence and our living day by day with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now the Al Shech HaKadosh on this pasuk says, Tomim Tiyah im Hashem Elokecha. Because Tomim Tiyah im, the Al Shech asks, why doesn't it say Tomim Tiyah lifnei Hashem Elokecha? Because he says, lifnei means when you're outside and everyone can see you, the world, and you're in front of our Kodesh Baruch Hu, he sees everything you're doing. But what about when you're in your house and no one else sees? That's im Hashem Elokecha. That a person has to perfect what he says and what he thinks and what he does when he is im Hashem Elokecha, that nobody else sees, nobody else hears, and no one knows what he's doing, just HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where it kicks in, Tomim Tiyah im Hashem Elokecha. So the Ksav Sofer asks about the Melech, V'hoya keshivto al kisei mamlachto. So he asks and says, why does it say kishivto when he is sitting on his throne? Why doesn't it say bishivto when he will become king and sit on the throne? It would have been more grammatically correct to have a base there rather than a shin, a chof, I'm sorry. When bishivto, sitting on the throne, not when he will be sitting. So he answers and says that the resolution for virtuous leadership should be even the 20th year if he's melech, not just when he becomes the king and he's sitting there thinking, how am I effectively going to be for history the most effective, sensitive, virtuous king. That's what he's thinking when he's becoming king. He has the best intention. But what about 20 years later when he's enjoying the royalty and the majesty of his kingship? Does he then have the same intentions in mind? But that's why it says kishivto, which means even the 20th year, says the Ksav Sofer, in effectively bringing about his reign of leadership for his country. We should be effectively refining the days and hours of Elul. And as I said to you, I think last week, that the Bnei Yissaschar says that there's 24 hours in a day, and there's 40 days from Rosh Chodesh Elul through Yom Kippur. And in the mikveh, there's 40 saw, and there's 24 lugin in each saw. So you have 960 saw, and you have 960 hours. And just like the mikveh is mitayr and mezachech the person, so too are the hours of Elul, Rosh Hashanah, and the Aseres Yemei Tshuva into the pinnacle and the turret of Olam Hazeh Yom HaKippurim.